Thank y'all very much. Give it up for Henry Bonilla for his leadership. It's really remarkable because there's been so many trailblazers who really were involved as a catalyst in connecting the Hispanic community in Texas with the Republican Party. Henry is one, Hope Andrade is another, Roy Barrera, who I did not see. Roy Barrera, when I first ran for Attorney General, there preceded me, Roy Barrera, who ran for Attorney General here in the state of Texas. He took me under his wing, mentored me, worked with me, connected me with the folks here in San Antonio and elsewhere. Roy, thank you for your legacy of leadership and connecting this community.
And so there you have it. That was a historic event in San Antonio, Texas. Welcome to TLC Live. Like every Wednesday, Andrea Gomez and Orlando Sanchez. We had a wonderful event yesterday in the heart of Tejano, Texas, which is San Antonio, Texas. And you're watching video of the event that our lovely producer, Andrea Gomez, took. But yesterday was a historic day, not only because it was a sellout event at the Whitty Museum in San Antonio, Texas, but today we're actually celebrating the first Tejano Day in the state of Texas, which is a joint resolution that the governor signed last legislative session recognizing the contributions of Mexican Americans, Latinos, as we know, Tejanos in Texas. And so we're very proud that the governor attended yesterday, and we were very proud to have historic figures from the Tejano world as our chairs. We had Hope Andrade, we had Congressman Henry Bonilla, we had Roy Barrera in the audience, as you heard the governor talk about his bid for Attorney General of the state of Texas.
John Lujan
was there, and we had railroad commissioners and other state representatives, and it was sort of a very historic day, and like I said, it was a great event. We were very proud of the people of San Antonio that supported it, especially Charlie Amato, who helped us with the SWBC out of San Antonio.
And we were honoring and giving the Tough Tejano Award to John Lujan. And also we have pretty fun entertainment at lunchtime for Chingo Bling.
Yeah, we had a Houston. I don't know if Chingo is from Houston or San Antonio because, I think he's from Houston, but he did go to school at Trinity. And that's where he started his career. He was absolutely hilarious. And, we want to salute Chingo Bling, first of all, for honoring us with his presence. And number two, the fact that he did a stand-up
comedy.
Act. Yeah, and it was tough for him because, it's a comedy act. And so obviously we had asked him to keep it clean, which he did. And he did a marvelous job. So to Chingo and his beautiful wife, Marisol, thank you for joining us. Made the event hugely successful. To our chairs, it was a fabulous event. And
our supporters and all the sponsors. It was an amazing event. And I know we have this Tough Tejano Award before, Orlando, but I think so far this one is the best one. I don't know how we're going to beat this one next year.
Yeah, this is our third event. We've done the first two in Houston, so this is our third Tough Tejano recognition to State Representative John Lujan. But as Andrea says, it's probably the best one that we've done, and so it's going to be tough. And for the last 2 years, we haven't been able to do it, even though we had the Whitty Museum booked in San Antonio because of COVID. So we came out of the chute really strong, and we're just delighted. So, and today is Tejano Day, so all the Tejanos, congratulations.
Felicitaciones.
This is your day, and we're happy to celebrate it.
Felicitaciones a todos los tejanos. Y yo soy colombiana, pero yo me considero ya tejana.
Tejana y yo cubano, pero soy tejano.
No, tú eres súper tejano, súper cowboy. Pero bueno, para hablarnos precisamente, to talk about this historical day and how we able to, not we, but exactly you and another people in the Congress, in the Texas Congress, that were putting together, and I wanted you to talk about that because this is very important, your contribution, that why we have Tejano Day this day and today, April 6th. But then I wanted you talk a little bit about that before we introduce our first guest that is going to put, a history behind this.
Yeah, well, as you all know, I mean, I'm an immigrant to this country from Havana, Cuba, but I've lived in Texas all of my life. And something that has always struck me is the lack of recognition sometimes of the contributions made by Mexican Americans and historic Mexican American families. I mean, there's a lot of history in Texas. As you know, Texas was colonized by the Spaniards, and then, the whole issue with Mexico. This was Mexico, and then we had Tejanos that weren't happy with El DF or Mexico City, and so that began some conflict in 1813. And then we moved into 1836, where Texas became independent of Mexico. But over the years, I've always been struck at the lack of attention given to the contributions of Tejanos, Mexican Americans in Texas, and that's always bothered me. And so for years, I've looked to see what we can do to recognize the contributions of Tejanos in Texas. And last year, we were fortunate enough to have a draft of a resolution that really was never changed in Texas. It was sponsored by State Representative Michael Schofield. It sailed through the House. It got tremendous bipartisan support, both Democrats and Republicans. And then it went over to the Senate. The lieutenant governor marshaled it through the Senate, and it ended up in the governor's desk. And that's how we have today, as the first official Tejano Day in Texas. And so we're truly honored to have Professor Raul Ramos. I'm a graduate of the University of Houston. I became keenly interested in highlighting the contributions of Mexican Americans. I studied under Professor Tacho Mendiola at the University of Houston. He had a program called Mexican American Studies. And a lot of people like to poo-poo ethnic studies. But let me tell you, that was one of the most beneficial courses I took at the University of Houston to understand Texas and the contributions of Tejanos. So we're honored to have Raul Ramos from the University of Houston, a historian. He's a graduate of both Princeton and Yale, and he's
And
an
also an
author.
author
Yes, he's an author, and
of
he
Beyond the Alamo.
yeah, Beyond the Alamo. So, Professor, thank you for taking time out to be with us this morning, and we're just delighted that you're going to share part of your day with us.
Oh, thank you very much for the invitation to join with you to talk about the meaning of Tejano Day and to think about uh, where where we go from here. Right? What are some of the things we can do to make to not only emphasize the changes that we hope Tejano Day brings about, but how to make those last throughout the years and for future generations.
It's no secret that the population of the state of Texas is changing. There's no secret that the Hispanic population in Texas accounted for the largest growth in overall population in Texas, according to the last census. So I want to focus specifically today on the history of Mexican Americans, on the history of Tejanos. How significant has that been in the history of Texas?
Well, the way I like to think of it is, and I have to say, I sometimes bristle at the using the word contribution, because contribution, feels a little bit like, well, something you bring to a potluck dinner, right? Who brought the macaroni and cheese? Who brought the potato salad? And here are the fajitas. That's the Mexican contribution, and it's a lot more than that, because if you really think about it, first of all, it's foundational. And this is before, for hundreds of years before Americans begin to immigrate into Texas. It's you have a long frontier history of cooperation and struggle between the various Mexican peoples and Spanish peoples and indigenous peoples in this region. And they have a long history that's established, that we still recognize the presence of. But really, if you really think about it, what is Texas without Tejanos, without Latinos generally? I mean, it's just Alabama otherwise, right? And what I'm getting at here is it's what makes Texas Texas. So it's fundamental, it's foundational, it's central. It's not an extra story. It's not a side bar. It's the main event. And so this is a challenge, because we're seeing that Tejano Day is responding to something. And maybe I'll ask you, you mentioned already you saw something was missing and you saw Tejano Day as responding to that. So what is the exact response? What was missing before, and what do you feel Tejano Day brings in this case?
Yeah, I can tell you that I went through public schools in Houston as a young man, and when I learned about I remember in second or third grade, maybe fourth grade, at Hobby Elementary School in Houston, we read a book on the history of Texas, and a large part of it was, dedicated to the Alamo. And it was about Bowie, and it was about Travis, and it was about Houston, but we never heard about, all the other names like Seguin and everybody that, we didn't even learn that one of the signers of the Texas Declaration of Independence was a Mexican, And so that absence always bothered me as I went through my education period. And as I said, as I matriculated in the program at the Mexican American Studies, I said, wow, really all this history has been missing from what I was taught. And so I've always advocated to my friends at the State Board of Education, to the legislature, that we have to tell the Mexican story in Texas. Because, Professor, I agree with you. Texas wouldn't be Texas without the involvement in the history of the Mexican contribution.
Absolutely. And so I'm left wondering, what we're really facing then is at least a popular image, both I think a little bit in Texas, but I think more outside of Texas, and that kind of comes back to Texas, of the word Texan itself not including Tejanos, including African Americans, including the diverse peoples in Texas. The word Texan ends up having a very homogenous representation, and sometimes even gendered, right? Do we think of, when you just say the word Texan, do you think of women? And it's, people will sometimes say, well, women Texans, and add it as a modifier. But our challenge is to redefine the word Texan to be inclusive of all the peoples, and that long, hundreds of years history of Texas, that the word Texan that we know, it includes that, and that changes both internally in Texas and externally. Look, I don't know, one of my favorite days in Houston every year is the rodeo parade.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, what makes the rodeo parade special and different than any parade in the country is not the floats and not the bands. I mean, of course, they're amazing, right? And the bands are one of a kind. It's the trail riders.
Mm-hmm.
The trail riders that come from every direction, from north, south, east, and west. And by east, I mean Louisiana, right? Coming as far as Louisiana, coming as far as the Mexico border, coming from West Texas, coming from the north. And you see the trail riders lined up on Memorial Parkway. And it's families, and it's every ethnicity and music that you can imagine. It's a party, and that's Texas at its best. It's a place where everyone can be themselves and see, and can add to that that beautiful sound. So I hope that's what Texan ends up meaning, and I think something like Tejano Day is a step in that direction to really say, not just, well, Mexicans, added tortillas or something individual, but rather Texas would not be Texas without us.
Wholeheartedly agree. Wholeheartedly agree.
Well, Professor, I'm from Colombia and I came to Texas
Mm-hmm.
in 1997. And something that I noticed, and I started getting, being part of what people think and love about Texas, is like people from Texas, they love this country, United States, as much as I love this country. But people from Texas, it's like You know, they're so patriot with the country, but they're so patriot with the state. And this like is a different feeling when you go to another state and people from another state, they don't love their state as much as people. And this is my personal feeling that I've been traveling to another states, but people from Texas is like they still wearing cowboy boots, the hat, you know, like from the como las películas del viejo oeste. Cuando I mean, I remember in Colombia watching what was this traditional
Westerns?
yeah, no,
The
like
Rifleman or
it was
Bonanza?
yeah,
or-
Bonanza. So, you know, when I was there before I came here, I thought it was just on the movies. But no, when I came here, like, oh my God, this is for real. People are still like, you know, riding horses and wearing hats and the boots. And this is like, it's not just on the rodeo time. It's like people every day wear boots. It's like, you know, se apropian y se ponen la camiseta y las botas and they love Texas and now I'm part of Texas, you know, and my kids, they feel more they're from Texas than from Colombia. They feel more Tejanos than Latinos. And this is a beauty, you know, and this is like a not only Tejano Day from the history back and in the history time, but this is a modern history. This is a Tejanos and the new face of Tejanos this day.
And I think you're pointing to some what I might call a challenge or a contradiction that that commemorations like the Hano Day are looking to change, right, or to settle, because look, Tejanas are incredibly diverse. Some live in cities, some live in the countryside, some live in suburbs, right? Everybody lives different ways, has different backgrounds. So, you know, my family's been in Coahuila for the most part, and are, but I'm, you know, my parents came to San Antonio and before I was born, and but then there's folks that have been here for 6, 7, 8 generations, and others who got here yesterday, right? And it's a big family in that way, and certainly that aspect of cowboy culture, you might call it, is, you know, that's most of northern Mexico, right? We call it norteño, right? We call it ranchero, right? It has
Vaqueros.
its own music, its own culture, its own food, its own politics, right? The in you know we When you talk about the Mexican Revolution, people talk about Pancho Villa and Carranza. They were norteños, right? They came from these rugged, rough areas, and um, and we again in the case of Texas being an American place, the contradiction is how does that history become included in how we think of Texas history and American history? Because you're right, this is not just Texas. This is the entire West, really, all the way to California. And the challenge is those old westerns. If you look at those old westerns, all the cowboys were Anglo, right? They rarely, maybe you'd have one black cowboy, maybe one Mexican cowboy, but the reality is it's never been that way ever, and especially today. Uh, you go to a working ranch, go to a working ranch, and the people working the ranch today are incredibly diverse. Uh, you know, they work together, and their families grow up together. I mean, it's not the way it's represented in those old Hollywood movies. I feel Hollywood's changing slowly. One of the first films I feel at least tried to punch a hole in how we think of these westerns was Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven. I don't know if you remember that Academy Award-winning film. It didn't address this question of, you know, vaqueros and, you know, thinking of the West demographically different, but it did kind of begin to tell you that this story of America and of the West is is kind of superficial. It's kind of it's almost like a fake stage, right? It's a facade that doesn't match the reality behind it. He presented reality in a different way, but what we're starting to see now is most popular westerns, including uh, last year's Academy Award winner Nomadland. This year was Story of the Dog, News from the World. You know, you start seeing a, a West where people struggled, where people felt pain, where people felt happiness. You know, that kind of full range of human emotion, and that's what we need to add is that range of humanity, and I think it makes it better. I think it makes it stronger. I think some folks lament or afraid of saying, well, what are we going to do without John Wayne? Look, John Wayne's never going away, right? I can promise you, John Wayne will be fine. What we're doing is saying this is a much bigger picture. It includes many more people then and now in the future, and there's space for everyone to participate in that. It's a more it's a more participatory community that way. So going back to what you were talking about this, Orlando, about the signers of the Texas Declaration of Independence. There were actually three Mexicans there were 60 signers of the Texas Declaration of Independence, March 2nd, 1836, in Washington on the Brazos. Three of those signers were Mexicanos. Two of them were Tejanos, though. Lorenzo de Zavala was not from Texas, probably closer to where you're from than where we're from here. He was, I think he was, I forget again if he was either from Veracruz or Yucatan. Any case, he comes to Texas and he signs the Texas Declaration of Independence. But the other two were Francisco Ruiz and Jose Antonio Navarro. Both of them didn't speak English, right? They had the document translated for them. But here's what's important. They were the only two signers of the Texas Declaration of Independence who were born in Texas, period. None of the other 58 came to Texas at different points, some 10 years before, some 2 years before. But they were born in Texas. That's what we lose. In some ways, the story, the biggest challenge to connecting the past to through all the 19th century into the 20th century for Mexicanos is to show that connection of being born in Texas and still participating in Texas history. Because the reality is, if you say Tejano to someone, they think immigrant. And that's the biggest challenge. I mean, many folks are immigrant, but again, there's such a resistance to this idea of being, of belonging and having to say who belongs and who doesn't, that we, in doing so, go overboard and cut our connection to the past.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time along the Rio Grande River. I was stationed at Laughlin Air Force Base in Valverde County, which, as you know, when you cross the border, you're actually in the Chihuahua Desert near the state of Coahuila. So I have spent a lot of time there, and you're absolutely correct, because even to this day, we're on April 30th, we're celebrating one of the largest bull riding events in Texas in Del Rio. And to me, it's always fascinating to see the blending of the cultures. We have Mexican bull riders and, Anglo, Caucasian bull riders from Texas. And unless you've been down there in Kinney County, in Maverick County, in Valverde County, and the Big Bend, you see that these ranchers, these Tejanos, the Texans, are long-term Mexican families that uphold Texas tradition. Real quick, Professor, I know you've got to go. Tell us a little bit about Beyond the Alamo. Essentially, you want us to read the book, but just real quick, tell us about Beyond the Alamo.
Sure. Look, when I did my undergraduate and graduate work in the East Coast and these rarefied universities, and one of the things I would think about is folks would say, well, are you going to tell the Mexican side of the Texas Revolution? And it always struck me as interesting, because it wasn't a question of Mexican side; it was Mexican homes. I mean, the Battle of the Alamo and the Texas Revolution, almost all of the actual battles happened in Tejano areas, and so really this was I felt my attempt to connect that history, as I was saying. So it looks specifically at San Antonio in what I would call this transition period, beginning with Mexican independence in 1821, the arrival of Americans, the peace treaties with indigenous peoples, and then ends with the war and then the challenges, the places where Tejanos were able to continue to make a difference, and the places where they were then starting to be excluded and marginalized and really made into, as Juan Seguin said it, foreigners in their own land, right? Foreigners in their native land. That's, to me, that's what the challenge of the history. It's, they didn't move, right? They were living in their home, and all of a sudden they became labeled foreigners. I like to say, July 4th, 1776 was imported to Texas, because in 1776 this was not Massachusetts, right? And so that's, I think that's part of the history that we want to recover, and say, in talking about it that way, I think have a more realistic sense of how this culture that, Andrea, you were talking about, how that culture became so dominant and so powerful, and that there's great celebrations that are part of it, but also negative parts of it that make it difficult to include our story.
Well, Professor, thank you for what you do. I think historians play a tremendous role in our society, and in my opinion, sometimes underappreciated. But in this day where we talk about wokeness and critical race theory, my friends on the right get all wrapped around the axle about it. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is actual history, what happened. And I've always been an advocate to tell the history of what happened in the United States and Texas, and the history of Mexican Americans, and my ancestry, which is obviously from Canary Islanders. We still have a Canary Islanders Association in San Antonio. The first mayor of the officially in Texas was a Canary Islander. So I'm for telling the history, and I just want to appreciate all you do for telling the real history of Texas and for taking time out to be on the program. We look forward to having you back, and frankly, I look forward to reading the book.
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to be back anytime.
Thank you, Professor.
Profesor, muchísimas gracias por su tiempo, y de verdad que, bueno, feliz día de los Tejanos a todos.
That's right.
Sí, gracias, Andrea. Les agradezco mucho por la oportunidad de hablar con ustedes.
Muchísimas gracias. Bueno, talking about Mexican American contribution, our next guest, before we bring him on the air, I want to show you a clip because he is being in national news. And let's roll the clip.
In the world of politics, there's always a shift. Well, joining us now is world champion boxer Jessie Vargas. On top of being a big-time boxer, you've also been outspoken in politics here, Jessie. And first of all, thanks for joining us. I just want to catch the viewers up to show them, because you wrote an op-ed for the Washington Times called "The Real Latin Exit: Why the GOP is Now the Hispanic Party." On top of that, you match it with a poll that came out today with those who switched parties, the majority of people becoming independents or Republicans. Talk to me about this, Jessie. So you were a Democrat. You would be a part of this switch to being a Republican. Why?
That is correct. I feel that, the Democratic Party left us. And, our values sit on the Republican Party. And we look back in the past, we look back at the history. And our values are on the Republican side. It's quite clear to us. It seems that, they sell things to us on the Democratic Party. And the Latino community has felt in the past that they need to vote Democrat, right? But we have waken up. We have understood where we sit, where we lie, and why that is, between family values, supporting small businesses. And we keep in mind that in 2020, the Latino community was a large community that was growing.
And that's why we have today Jessie Vargas he's from Los Angeles, but he is in Las Vegas right now.
Yeah, and let me tell you something, Jessie. I am reminded of Cassius Clay Muhammad Ali. He used to claim how beautiful he was. I got to tell you, for a boxer, you're an extremely handsome fellow, so probably you don't get hit a lot. So listen, thank you.
Que no te dañen tu cara hermosa, por favor.
But thank you for taking time out to be with us. Thank you for having the courage to stand up and to speak out. We've always said here in Texas that if our Mexican Americans and our Tejano community here in Texas, because that's what we refer ourselves to, vote our values, that we will perpetuate this great country. So Congratulations for stepping up and sharing your values of family and faith and hard work and dedication with the rest of America.
I don't know.
Jesse, can you hear
Jessie,
us?
can you hear us?
Well, maybe he's muted. We can't hear you, Jesse.
We cannot hear you. We cannot
Are
hear
you
you.
muted?
Are you mute? Unmute yourself.
All right, we'll get him back in just a minute. We'll figure this out. But anyway, I am proud of, for example, Jessie and Chingo that are standing up and talking about the values that represent the Latino community in the state of Texas and in the country. And while we may claim that this trend in Texas along the Rio Grande border is just indigenous to Texas, I don't think it is. I mean, I think across the nation, as the surveys indicate, that people are realizing that we're proud of our history. We're proud of being Latinos, not Latinx.
Correcto.
I mean, because the liberal left wants to now label us Latinx, whatever the hell that means.
No sé de dónde se lo inventan.
No, pero lo siguen. And so it's people that are understanding what the left is doing in this country and sharing their values, like our friend Chingo Bling and like Jessie Vargas and others across the country. And we're just extremely proud of them for standing up and, first of all, saying, these are our values. This is what we believe in. And so, whether those are Republican or Democrat values, fine. People have to make a choice politically because they have to vote based on their values. And I think, as Jessie says, maybe, a lot of the Mexican American community was voting Democrat because it's what their parents and grandparents did. But this younger generation is saying those values are no longer represented in that party. And so they're looking to the red team.
Okay, let's see. We have Jessie now. Jessie, can you hear us? No, I think you're mute. You're in mute. You're muting yourself. No? He's trying to do it with his phone. We cannot hear you. You know what? Take off the headphones. Take off the headphones. Take off the headphones and just leave it without the headphones. Okay, I think now we can.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Right.
I think the headphones was the problem.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. It was
Yeah.
the entire time.
Jesse, we love technology,
Okay.
but sometimes there's hiccups.
Good now.
Well, listen, I don't know. I'm assuming you heard what we said. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for having the courage to step up, and thank you for having the courage to pursue your dream in the ring. But tell us a little bit. I didn't even know this until this afternoon. I heard about you through the national news, but I didn't know that you were a candidate for U.S. Congress. So, what inspired you?
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me on your show. It's a pleasure. Second of all, thank you for the compliment that you gave me earlier. Third, the reason why I've got involved and I wanted to be a voice for the community is because we didn't have it. We didn't have that. We don't have many leaders in the community or in the country that can represent us properly. We do have people like yourself, Andrea, right, that are speaking and informing us, because a lot of the people here are misinformed, and especially the Latino community. And I think it's our duty to just inform the people of what we have learned, of some of the knowledge that we have obtained. And that's all I'm trying to do within my community, and being a voice, right? Being a leader in the community. Thankfully, I've reached the American dream. I'm proud to say that I'm well accomplished because of my family, because of the roots, instilled in me, right? The hard work ethic that we've always had, those family values. And now I want to make sure that I'm doing things that are proper, in the community, not just looking out for myself and my family, but actually looking after the community. I am still an active world champion, thankfully, right? I'm not a current world champion. What I mean by that is that I am currently still boxing, right? I am a high caliber fighter, ranked top 15 in the world. I've been a former two-time world champion, as you said, but now, I'm just frustrated with what's occurring, that it has got me out of my element to actually be more involved in the community, to be running for office. Unfortunately, I had to put a pause on the campaign there because of some unforeseen circumstances. So I was supposed to fight February. Well, the schedule was thrown off, unfortunately. I have a lot more details there, but I want to talk about the community, where we stand, why, and how to keep our community informed of what's currently going on, because we're in tough times. We're in tough times. We have inflation skyrocketing, right? A lot of people are really struggling right now in many ways, and we want to be people that are informing others on what can be done, what can be coming soon. How common or what are the possibilities of another recession coming? I mean, I'm looking out for the interests of others. I'm trying to inform people on what's important right now in our country.
Listen, I can't thank you enough for stepping up. I mean, and we need fighters like you, and I mean that both in the ring and in the public
And without the
square.
ring, yeah.
But you're absolutely correct, Jesse. I mean, I know you understand this, but there is a need for people like you and for people like Andrea and for our organization TLC to educate our community. And you hit the nail on the head. Right now, we have inflation. We have almost $7 a gallon for gasoline in portions of California. I don't know what it's running in Los Angeles, but the price of groceries, according to the Agriculture Department, just 3 days ago announced that it costs American families $2,600 more to feed their family. And people are scratching their heads wondering what's going on. Well, let me tell you, Jesse, I have an opinion. Do you remember when Barack Obama was elected and they shut down the Keystone Pipeline? That has a long-term effect. And so now we have this fuel shortage because, the price of a commodity is based on demand and supply, right? The more demand there is and the lower the supply, the higher the price. So there's this tremendous demand coming out of COVID for fossil fuels, gasoline, diesel for our vehicles. And we have to educate our community that shutting down a Keystone Pipeline, that agreeing to the Paris Climate Accord, to subscribing to AOC's Green New Deal costs us money. It costs us money because now we're paying the consequences. Because we have more demand than supply, the prices are going up. And people in our community need to be educated, because the left will tell you, oh yeah, we're going to clean the water and we're going to give you clean air to breathe. My God, we're not the biggest polluters when it comes to carbon emissions in this world. It's China, it's Russia, it's India. The United States bends over backwards to make sure that we have a clean environment. So I'm glad you're sharing those messages, and I'm sure you want to add something to that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're right on all points, and that's the entire reason why I've decided to be more involved. I mean, once you get into the pockets of my community, of the people who are hardworking, who have been saving up for 10 years, 15 years for the kids to go to prestige universities, right, to get good education. Once you're stealing their money out of their bank, that's what inflation is, right? Because it's it's not unforeseen circumstances. It's circumstances that came through decision making by our current administration. As we all know, that's affecting everyone's pockets, right? Because everything has its own circumstances, right? Is they I want to say, when it comes to the current administration, the unprepared circumstances, right, that led to everything that's occurring now. I mean, let's keep in mind. Let me also inform a little bit more on the inflation situation, because right now, I mean, the consumer inflation is at about 7.9%. It's at a 40-year high. Producer inflation is at a 10% all-time high, right? And that producer inflation doesn't affect the big corporations as much, because I mean, it affects everyone, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't affect the big corporations as much, because I mean, they have leverage to negotiate their prices because of the amount of orders that they have, right? They have these large, massive orders they can negotiate. Small businesses cannot negotiate because, of course, they have smaller leverage there, unfortunately. And that's really affecting their small business. And I feel that small business is really the core of our country, is the small business. I mean, keep in mind, I mean, we need to think that the American dream is something that we promoted for so many years, for decades, actually, right? This is why that's why we are proud to be Americans. Say we've reached the American dream. We offer the American dream,
right? To everybody that's a well American citizen that is able to work hard, continue to push forward, right? They can attain the American dream. But with everything occurring, it seems much more difficult for that to happen, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating because I want people to want to succeed and not rely so much on the government, right? That's what this country has always been founded on, right? Hard work, family values. And now it seems like the American dream isn't as attainable as it was before. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still a possibility. We're just making it more complicated for our American citizens to actually reach that American dream. And to me, it's hurtful. It's hurtful to our community. And when it comes to the producer inflation, it's affecting the sectors that our Latino community and that a lot of employees work in, such as construction, foods and goods, those sectors, right? The transportation, manufacturing, those are the sectors that are really being ravaged by producer inflation. And I mean, some sectors are gonna, get a gain in their income, right? In the minimum wage, but those are the sectors that are really being affected by right now, and I'm worried for them. I'm worried for my people that work, day to day, day in, day out, and also who are, because 60% of our Americans actually are living paycheck to paycheck, and those are people I'm really worried for as well. Because I mean, what are they gonna do once groceries continue to rise? Once gas prices continue to rise, they're already pretty high themselves already. But keep in mind, 60% of them are working, just to make ends meet. And I'm hoping that we could all come up with a solution, because at the end of the day, we need to continue to push our country moving forward, not backwards and not downwards. I mean, you said it yourself as well that we have the environmentalists who are so focused on taking care of our country, but we also need to keep in mind if we don't distribute oil here, right, and we don't manufacture more things here, other countries will, as you said, China, right? I mean, we're trying to buy oil from Venezuela, right, from Iran. I mean, these are countries that aren't our friends. I mean, I hope that they will be, but Iran doesn't have the best wishes for the United States, from my understanding. I mean, believe me, I've done my fair amount of research, and Venezuela, believe me, there's going to be much more pollution and oil leaks in Venezuela than there will be in the United States. So for those environmentalists, why don't you focus on maybe bettering the system in the United States? Because we need to produce here in order for us to continue to offer opportunities to others. That's what they need to keep in mind. So there's so much that we can talk about, but I really hope that we have good leaders. I mean, we have the midterms coming up soon, and I want everyone to come out and vote. I really hope that you come out and vote for the right candidates that want to promote opportunity, that want to promote good education, and for us to become stronger, because every time that there's tough times, we become stronger from it. And I hope that this is a time for it, because times are crucial.
Yeah, Jesse, I mean, you're an inspiration. It's unbelievable everything that you're saying, and it's so true. But I want you to share more in details what it make you switch parties, but deep than that, than switch just a party. What make you recognize that the values that you grow up, the values of your family, the values that you believe, it was not with this political party, but it was with this one. Because we advocate here in the Texas Latino Conservatives, vote your values. This is very important, vote your values. And people don't understand, or many people don't understand, that we need to vote our values. We need to really go back to basic. Go back to basic. And it's just family. And it's we come to this country to work. And I bet you that your parents that came, that there are immigrants, and I was reading your bio, they're immigrants, and I wanted you to share a little bit of your family history. That way people understand where you're coming from and why you are doing what you're doing right now.
Of course. Well, I've realized where I stand because, not too long ago, I was sitting back and I was talking to my friends about politics, what was currently going on. it led me to come back home and really know where I stand and why, right? And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, the Republican side, these are the values there. Democratic side, this is the values here. This is strange because everything that the Republican Party stands for, that's what I'm about. That's what my family's about. I spoke to my family about it shortly after that, and they agreed with me that, I mean, we do sit in the Republican Party. That we don't always vote Democrat. And then we came to realize, maybe it's because we as a community, as a Latino community, we believe, a lot of us used to believe that the Democratic side is for us, right? They're fighting for us. But when we come down to it, right, and look at the facts and the statistics, our values are on the Republican side, and that's what led me to sit and to run as a Republican candidate. And I mean, I've always been proud of who I am, right? I know where I come from. Yo soy muy orgulloso de donde vengo, reconozco de donde vengo y o sea, mi familia vino de México, yo nací en Estados Unidos y pues aquí esta es nuestra casa, esta es nuestra casa y queremos ver que siga creciendo y que siga llegando a cosas grandes, que sea el mejor país del mundo, ¿verdad? Y es por eso que yo estoy buscando la manera de informarme como se debe para yo también pasar esa información para otra gente en mi comunidad. Me siento que tengo esa responsabilidad como figura pública y eso es lo que voy a hacer de este punto para adelante. Pues claro, que ustedes saben bien que soy un campeón mundial y pues eso es lo que nos mantiene, ¿no? Aquí en mi familia y va a ser un gran enfoque mío, pero aparte de eso, pues un gran enfoque mío también va a estar en estar involucrado con la comunidad. Siempre lo he estado, pero ahorita lo estoy llevando a otro punto, ¿verdad? Lo estoy llevando a otro nivel donde pues estoy muy bien informado con toda la gente y pasándole esta información. And unfortunately, sometimes I may get a little backlash from other people who they may be standing on the left, but I'm happy to have a conversation with them and let them know where I stand, right? I mean, some of them a lot of them may be Latino, as a matter of fact, but it's my duty to give them the information on why I am sitting on the Republican Party, and I'm not against them, right? I am here to support the hardworking class, the people that sit in our values, and everyone in general. But of course, everybody knows where I stand, right? And it's just my duty to give them this information. And who knows? Maybe, and most likely, and I hope that they will understand where I come from, and maybe we'll be able to also compare themselves, I guess, in a certain way, to actually relate and understand why I did it, and might switch them over as well to doing the same thing.
I got to tell you, and I say this all the time, it's people like you and your family that make America great. The idea that you realize the opportunities you've had, Jessie, you've gotten an education. Through hard work, your family has survived and they thrived. Through your professionalism in the ring, you've now been able to provide for your family. And it's people like you, when you share that story, that makes America and the opportunities we have and the freedoms we have and the liberties that we have the envy of the world. That's why people want to come here. I always ask people, how many Americans are trying to flee to Venezuela? How many of us are trying to flee to Nicaragua or Cuba or Iran or China or Russia? No, we're not going anywhere. We may go visit, but we want to live here. And the rest of the world wants to live here. And it is your story that makes, it's my story. I'm an immigrant from Havana, Cuba. She's an immigrant from Colombia. These are the stories that make America great. And I know the left tried to make fun of the tag that President Trump used, which make America great again. But I think what happened is that the left misread the burgeoning Latino community. We're not a community that wants to rely on government for alimentos, for our food, for our health care, para nuestra salud. Yeah, we want our government to help those that can't help themselves, and that's why we pay taxes. But we want to be entrepreneurial. We want to make things great. Whatever we do as Latinos in this country, we work hard at it, just like you have in the ring, because that's our seal. This is telling the world we work hard, we want to succeed, we want excellence. And the government can't provide excellence. We can. Our family provides values. We're a community that we don't care what happens in the bedroom. We don't care what your gender identity is. But at the same time, we don't want our children indoctrinated. Is that how you see it, Jessie? I guess we lost
I think you mute yourself again. No, we cannot hear you now.
We can't hear you, Jessie.
Let's maybe you mute yourself. Oh,
He's gone. He's going to come back in a minute. But look, what an honor it is to have
Oh
Jessie
my God,
Vargas,
amazing.
a professional boxer out of Las Vegas, son of immigrants, raised in the heart of Los Angeles, California.
Los Angeles, California.
And, you know, really makes me proud because...
Okay, he's back.
All right, so I don't know how much of that long
Hear me?
diatribe,
Sí,
but did
yeah.
you hear my question and do you have a comment on it?
Yeah, I did hear your question. My apologies. I just I received the call and it just messed up my phone completely. My apologies.
Oh,
all
okay,
right.
that's fine.
Going back to your question, I feel I agree with you on every point you just stated. You know, we're here to fight for new opportunities. We're here to succeed, right? And we don't want any handouts. We don't want anything given to us. There's so much pride behind our community, man, that I'm really proud of just that, right? That we want to gain success from our own effort, right? We don't want anything given to us. That's one thing that I need to inform a lot of people on, right? That I mean, I know, and I know a bunch of my friends. I know a bunch of people who they may work 2 jobs, right? Just to meet ends meet, right? To look out for the families, to have a certain amount of success, to save a certain amount of income to actually have a better education for their children. Like, we are the hard-working class, right? And I can't stress that enough because I'm really proud of them. I'm really proud of my community, of how they just are looking for ways to have their sacar su familia adelante, to help their family prosper in one way or another, because that's what my family did, and in order for us to gain success, and thankfully they instilled that in me. And you know, I just want to spread the word of what our beliefs in and why. And again, I mean, I'm gonna get some backlash on it too, right? I mean, I'm not trying to change my question too much. I mean, your question, but I mean, I agree with every point. That's why I'm going to say this. And even though I'm becoming more of a voice, I may get some backlash from, say, certain people in the Latino community who may be Democrats, or just people in the nation who are Democrats, and they may not like me now because, you know, I vote Republican. But I mean, that's the whole problem with the U.S. We're supposed to be united, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
Unite and come up with the best solutions possible for our country. At the end of the day, we have to live here, right? At the end of the day, this is our country, right? Mm-hmm. And we want it to be better than it was before, right? And then better than we left it, you know, and from 100 years to come, God willing, right?
All right.
But
listen, we're running out of time, Jessie. I'm going to tell you something. I don't. Everybody likes you. Everybody likes a champ, and in our book, you're a champ. And so we want to thank you. We're out of time, but we want to invite you back. Would you agree to come back with us at some point?
Sure, it'd be my pleasure. Sería un placer.
Queremos invitarte después de tu pelea. He's gonna have a fight on the April 30th.
We need to go to Las Vegas.
Oh, we need to go to... Yeah, you know what? That will be awesome. Okay.
Good luck, buddy.
Invitados. Good luck.
Knock them out.
Así que, keep it up. Sigue peleando, no solamente en el ring, pero fuera del ring, porque de verdad, gente como tú es que necesitamos más en este país.
Take care, champ.
Thank you.
Gracias, Jessie.
Thank you.
Wow.
All right. Well, we're going to cut it off because we're out of time. But
What a show.
Thank you. What a week. You know, happy Tejano Day for you Texans. Thank you to the people of San Antonio for hosting us yesterday. And we will see you again next week. God bless.
Ciao, ciao.